When an avoidant runs, it's not rejection, it's survival mode. You need to understand this distinction because it will completely change how you perceive their behavior and how you respond to it. When you see someone suddenly distance themselves, disappear, or pull back the very moment things start to feel real, the natural reaction is to internalize it. You think, what did I do wrong? Am I not good enough? Did I scare them away? That's the trap. That's the lens of rejection. But here's the truth. What they're really running from isn't you. It's the overwhelming flood of emotions they can't regulate. It's their own nervous system screaming, danger! When in reality, what's happening is love. For an avoidant, closeness feels threatening, not because intimacy is bad, but because intimacy touches the very place inside them they've spent years protecting. Their survival mechanism says, don't let anyone get too close, because if they see all of you, you'll get hurt. You'll be abandoned. You'll be rejected. And so, they push away the very thing they crave. They long for connection. But the moment they taste it, the alarm bells go off. It's not rational. It's primal. It's the body reacting before the mind can even process what's happening. Think about fire. To most of us, fire is warmth, energy, light. But if you've ever been burned, the next time you see that flame, you don't just see warmth. You see danger. That's exactly what love feels like to someone with avoidant tendencies. They're not seeing your love as nourishment. They're seeing it as a flame that could burn down everything they've carefully built to protect themselves. So, when they run, it isn't because your love is unworthy. It's because love itself feels unsafe. Now, if you look at it through that lens, their withdrawal suddenly has a different meaning. Running away is not them saying, I don't want you. It's them saying, I don't know how to survive this closeness. The body keeps the score. Childhood experiences, early betrayals, broken trust, these things wire the nervous system to equate love with risk. And so, the moment they get close enough to feel the possibility of love, their instinct is not to lean in, but to retreat. It's not a calculated rejection. It's a survival reflex. Here's the danger for you. If you interpret their survival response as rejection, you'll react out of your own insecurity. You'll start chasing. You'll start demanding answers. You'll start questioning your worth. And the very moment you do that, you reinforce their belief that love is suffocating, love is unsafe, love is something to run from. You see the cycle. They run because they're scared, and you chase because you're scared, and together you recreate the very dynamic they've been running from their whole life. But the truth is, rejection is not what's happening here. They are not rejecting you. They are protecting themselves. That's a radical shift in perspective. When you stop personalizing their withdrawal, you step out of the emotional trap. You begin to see their behavior for what it really is, fear disguised as distance. And when you understand that, you can respond with power, not desperation. You can hold your ground. You can choose not to mirror their fear. Let's take this even deeper. Every human being has two core needs in relationship: the need for love and the need for safety. The avoidant craves love, but the moment they start to feel it, safety feels threatened. So they trade intimacy for distance in order to restore equilibrium. It's a tragic paradox. The very closeness that could heal them is the closeness they run from. And if you don't understand this paradox, you'll keep thinking they're rejecting you, when in reality, they're rejecting the terror inside themselves. So the next time an avoidant pulls away, I want you to reframe it in your mind. Don't say, they don't want me. Say, they don't know how to feel safe with what they want. That shift in perspective doesn't excuse their behavior, but it liberates you from the lie of rejection. It puts you back in your power. And from that place of power, you no longer respond with panic. You respond with presence. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't try to convince. You simply stand. And in your stillness, they see something different, that love doesn't have to be chaos. That closeness doesn't have to mean pain. That intimacy doesn't have to mean losing themselves. Because here's the ultimate truth. When an avoidant runs, they are not running from you. They are running from the magnitude of what they feel. And sometimes the very fact that they ran is proof of how deeply they were impacted by your presence. So don't confuse survival mode with rejection. Don't let their fear of love become the story you tell yourself about your worth. Remember this, what looks like rejection is often just fear in disguise. And fear, when met with strength and stillness, has the chance to transform into something else. Trust. The fear of love is greater than the desire for love. That's the heart of the avoidant struggle, and unless you grasp this paradox, you'll misinterpret every move they make. You see, when most people think about relationships, they assume that love is the ultimate goal. We all want connection, we all want intimacy, we all want to be seen and known, right? But for the avoidant, love itself is not just a goal, it's a threat. And here's why love demands vulnerability. Love demands openness. Love demands that you surrender control. And for someone who has built their entire identity around self-protection, that surrender feels like annihilation. It's easy to say we all want love, but wanting love and being able to tolerate love are two very different things. This is where the avoidant gets trapped. Deep down, they crave closeness. They long for someone to understand them, to connect with them, to stand beside them. But the closer that possibility becomes, the louder their fear grows. Because love, in their world, is not experienced as safety. It's experienced as exposure. It's like standing naked under a spotlight while every flaw, every insecurity, every wound is visible. And for someone who has survived by keeping those wounds hidden, that exposure is unbearable. So what do? They pull back. They retreat into distance. They convince themselves they don't need anyone, that independence is safer, that attachment is weakness. They live in this constant tug of war between desire and terror. The desire to connect, the terror of being destroyed by it. And when push comes to shove, fear wins. Every time. Think about that for a moment. Fear is stronger than desire. It doesn't matter how much they want you, how much they care about you, or even how deeply they feel for you. If the fear of losing themselves, the fear of rejection, the fear of suffocation outweighs the pull of love, fear wins the battle. That's why they can love you and run from you at the same time. That's why their actions don't match their feelings. That's why their words and behaviors seem contradictory. It's not because they don't care. It's because the fear of love is more powerful, more immediate, more overwhelming than the desire for it. And let me tell you something that might shock you. The depth of their fear is actually evidence of the depth of their desire. If you didn't matter, they wouldn't panic. If you didn't stir something inside them, they wouldn't feel threatened. Fear doesn't show up where nothing matters. Fear only rises in the presence of something significant. That's why avoidants don't run from casual encounters. They run when the connection starts to feel real. They run when their heart starts to soften. They run when the walls they've spent years building start to crack. Now, here's where you need to be careful. If you interpret their running as a lack of desire, you'll misread the entire situation. You'll believe they don't care, that they're rejecting you, that you're wasting your time. And in that mindset, you'll either chase harder to prove your worth or walk away in bitterness. Neither response helps, because both are rooted in misunderstanding. You have to see the truth. Their fear is not evidence of your insignificance. It's evidence of how deeply your presence impacts them. Let's look at this psychologically. The human brain is wired for survival first, love second. Safety trumps intimacy, and the avoidant nervous system has been conditioned to believe that closeness is unsafe. That conditioning is stronger than their conscious desire. They may want love, but their subconscious mind is screaming, "Danger! Protect yourself!" And that subconscious always wins, unless they consciously do the work to rewire it. This is where your role becomes critical. You cannot fight their fear with force. You cannot override their panic with pressure. If you do, their fear will grow stronger. The only way through is to understand this paradox and hold your ground without collapsing into insecurity. You don't make their fear your problem. You don't let their panic dictate your value. You recognize that their retreat is not a reflection of your inadequacy, but of their own internal battle. And here's the deeper philosophical truth. The fear of love is the fear of transformation. Because love changes you. It dismantles your walls. It challenges your identity. It forces you to let go of control. To someone who has built their life around control and independence, that transformation feels like death. They're not just afraid of love. They're afraid of the person they'll have to become to fully receive it. And yet, that is exactly the transformation that sets them free. So when an avoidant runs, don't take it personally. See it for what it is, the fear of love overtaking the desire for love. And remember, fear is a powerful force, but it is not permanent. With time, with safety, with patience, fear can dissolve. But only if you refuse to let their fear become your prison. Never forget this, when fear feels stronger than desire, love doesn't disappear, it waits. And sometimes, the most powerful act you can make is not to chase their fear, but to stand in your strength until they realize that love is not what destroys them. It's what heals them. When an avoidant goes silent, most people interpret that silence as punishment. They think, they're ignoring me to hurt me. They're trying to control me. They're pulling away to make me chase. But that's not the reality. Silence for an avoidant is not a weapon. It's a shield. It's the only way they know to protect themselves when emotions become overwhelming. It's their nervous system hitting the emergency brake. Think about how most people deal with emotional intensity. Some fight, some argue, some cry, some cling. Avoidants don't do that. Their coping mechanism is withdrawal. When their heart rate spikes, when intimacy feels too close, when emotions rise beyond what they can tolerate, they shut down. Not because they want to hurt you, but because shutting down is the only way they've learned to survive. Silence is the armor they put on when love feels too heavy to carry. And here's the paradox: silence doesn't mean they don't feel. In fact, silence often means they feel too much. Their system is overloaded. They don't have the capacity to process what's happening in real time, so they retreat to regain control. It's like an electrical system overheating. Instead of pushing forward until the whole thing burns out, they flip the breaker switch and go dark for a while. That darkness isn't rejection, it's regulation. But of course, if you're on the other side of that silence, it feels brutal. It feels like abandonment, like indifference, like rejection. You're left alone with your questions, and in that void your mind begins to create stories. They don't care. They don't love me. I must not matter. This is where the cycle of pain really begins, because their silence collides with your insecurity, and suddenly two wounded patterns are dancing with each other, one avoiding, one chasing. This is why it's crucial to reframe silence for what it truly is. It's not personal. It's not punishment. It's protection. Their silence is them saying, I don't know how to stay close and stay safe at the same time, so I need to pull back until I can breathe again. And once you see it this way, you stop internalizing it. You stop making their coping strategy about your worth. You begin to see the truth, that silence is their shield against fear, not a rejection of your love. Now, let's go deeper. Philosophically, silence has always carried dual meaning. In one sense, silence is absence, an emptiness that feels cold and void. But in another sense, silence is space, the ground where growth happens, the pause between notes that gives music its beauty. For the avoidant, silence is both. It is absence, yes, but it is also space. They are creating distance not to erase you, but to stabilize themselves. And if you can resist the urge to panic in that space, you give silence the chance to transform from absence into clarity. But here's where people sabotage themselves. When avoidance goes silent, most people respond with noise, texting, calling, demanding, pleading. And every attempt to break the silence only confirms the avoidant's deepest fear. Closeness is suffocating. Love is consuming. I'll lose myself if I stay. Your pursuit turns their shield into a fortress. And then you wonder why the wall only gets taller the more you try to climb it. The secret is this. When an avoidant goes silent, your power lies in stillness. Don't meet their silence with desperation. Meet it with presence. Meet it with calm. Show them through your actions that silence doesn't scare you, that you don't collapse without constant reassurance, that you are capable of holding your ground without losing yourself. Because when they finally look back and see you standing strong instead of chasing frantically, that's when their shield begins to soften. That's when silence stops being a wall and starts becoming a bridge. And let me tell you something profound. Sometimes the silence of an avoidant speaks louder than words. If they truly didn't care, they wouldn't need the silence. Indifference doesn't retreat. Indifference doesn't hide. Indifference has nothing to protect. The fact that they need the shield reveals that something inside them is being touched, something too powerful for them to face head on. Their silence is the proof of your impact. So the next time you encounter that silence, don't fall into the trap of making it about you. Don't let your own insecurity turn their shield into your wound. Instead, see it for what it is, a sign of their struggle, a coping mechanism born from fear, a survival response that has nothing to do with your value. And in that moment, remind yourself of the truth. You are not being punished. You are witnessing their fear. Silence is not rejection. Silence is protection. And when you stop fearing their silence, you give them permission to stop fearing your closeness. Because here's the reflection I want you to leave with. Their silence is not the absence of love. It's the noise of fear turned inward. And when you understand that, you stop chasing noise and start embodying strength. And strength, not desperation, is what teaches fear that love can be safe. Here's the paradox most people miss when an avoidant pulls away. It isn't because they feel nothing. It's because they feel too much. Distance isn't proof of indifference. It's proof of impact. The more they run, the more they reveal the depth of what's happening inside of them. And if you don't understand that paradox, you'll misinterpret everything. You'll see their retreat as rejection instead of realizing it's actually the opposite. Think about it. If you didn't matter to them, they wouldn't need to run. If your presence didn't stir something deep, they wouldn't feel threatened. The fact that they retreat is not a sign of disinterest. It's a sign of significance. You've touched a place inside them that no one else has touched. And that's what terrifies them. Because that part of them, the part that longs for closeness, the part that wants to love and be loved, is the very part they've spent their whole life burying under armor. For most avoidants, intimacy feels like vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like danger. Their entire nervous system has been programmed to believe that closeness will end in loss, abandonment, or rejection. So when they begin to feel real emotions, when they begin to sense that their heart is opening, panic sets in. It's not that they don't want you. It's that the depth of what they feel threatens the fragile balance they've created inside themselves. And so they run. But running doesn't mean emptiness. Running means weight. Running means pressure. Running means your presence has broken through their defenses, and now they don't know how to handle it. That's the irony of the avoidant. Indifference feels calm, but love feels chaotic. And when chaos arises, their instinct is to retreat. Not to erase the connection, but to manage it. Now let's bring this closer to home. You've probably experienced this before. You're with someone, things are going well, you feel the connection growing, and then, out of nowhere, they start pulling away. They stop responding as quickly, they cancel plans, they create space. And what do you tell yourself? You tell yourself, they're losing interest. I must have done something wrong. They don't care. But that's the story of rejection your mind creates to fill the gap. The reality is far different. What you're witnessing is not the collapse of feeling. It's the surge of it. They're not withdrawing because you don't matter. They're withdrawing because you matter more than they know how to handle. From a psychological perspective, this is actually one of the clearest indicators of attachment activation. Their system is screaming, "This is dangerous," not because you are dangerous, but because the emotions you awaken threaten to dismantle the safety structures they've built. You've shaken the foundation. And instead of leaning into that instability, they step back to find balance. That's not absence of love. That's love colliding with fear. Now here's where you need wisdom. If you misinterpret their distance as rejection and start chasing them, you intensify the very fear that made them pull back in the first place. You confirm their deepest belief that love is consuming, that closeness means losing freedom, that intimacy equals suffocation. Your reaction feeds their fear, but if you see their distance as a sign of depth, if you understand that running means they feel, you respond differently. Instead of chasing, you stand still. Instead of panicking, you hold your ground. You show them, through your steadiness, that their fear doesn't need to dictate your behavior. There's something powerful that happens in that moment. When they finally look back and see that you haven't collapsed, that you're not spiraling in insecurity, that you're still standing with strength and calm, it challenges their entire worldview. Suddenly, love doesn't look like chaos. It looks like stability. It looks like something that doesn't threaten their existence, but actually makes it safer. And that's when distance begins to shrink. Philosophically, this is one of the greatest paradoxes of human connection. The very act of running is often proof of the very bond they're running from. The more intense the feeling, the greater the urge to escape. It's counterintuitive, but once you understand it, it liberates you from the lie of rejection. You stop taking their distance as evidence that you don't matter and start seeing it as confirmation that you do. This is why emotional maturity is everything. If you can hold onto that truth, if you can see distance not as dismissal, but as a symptom of depth, you stop reacting out of fear. And when you stop reacting, you change the entire dynamic. Because here's the bottom line: the distance of an avoidant doesn't reveal the absence of love, it reveals the magnitude of it. So don't be fooled by their retreat. Don't let the silence convince you that you're invisible. Their very act of running is proof that you've reached the place inside them they fear most and also need most. Remember this: when they pull away, it's not because they don't care. It's because you matter more than they ever expected, and that reality shakes them to their core. And here's the reflection to carry with you: the greater the distance, the deeper the feeling. Don't misread the signal. Distance is not rejection. Distance is the shadow cast by love they don't yet know how to hold. Most people don't realize this, but when an avoidant runs, they're not rejecting love. They're rejecting themselves. They are not pushing away the relationship because you don't matter. They're pushing away because deep down, they don't believe they deserve it. And that's the tragedy of the avoidant. The very thing they crave is the very thing they sabotage, not because they don't want it, but because they feel unworthy of it. You see, avoidants carry an invisible script in their mind, one that was written long before you ever came into their life. That script goes something like this: if you really knew me, if you saw my flaws, if you uncovered the truth about who I am, you would leave. You would reject me. You would abandon me. So rather than wait for that imagined rejection, they take control of it. They preemptively pull away, creating distance before you get the chance to hurt them. They don't reject you. They reject the version of themselves they believe isn't lovable. This is why so many people misinterpret their withdrawal. On the surface, it looks cold, it looks dismissive, it looks like they're running away from you. But at the core, they're running away from themselves. They're running from the belief that they are not enough. And that belief is so deeply ingrained, So tied to their identity, that love feels like a spotlight, exposing everything they're terrified to reveal. Think about it like this. Imagine someone who has spent their whole life hiding a scar. They've covered it up. They've avoided mirrors. They've convinced themselves that no one could ever see it and still love them. Then suddenly, someone comes along who sees past the mask, someone who looks at them with unconditional affection. Do you know what happens? They panic because love threatens to expose the very thing they've spent their life hiding. And in that panic, they run, not because the love isn't real, but because the wound feels too shameful to share. This is the psychology of avoidance. They equate intimacy with exposure and exposure with rejection. So when love starts to feel real, the alarm bells go off. If I let this person close enough, they'll discover the truth. And when they do, they'll leave. The irony, of course, is that the very thing they fear, being unworthy of love, is the very thing that keeps them from receiving the love that could prove them wrong. They are trapped in a self-fulfilling prophecy. They run to avoid rejection, and in running, they create the very loss they feared. Now, here's where you come in. If you don't understand this dynamic, you'll make their running about you. You'll think, I wasn't enough. I should have done more. I should have loved harder. And in doing that, you start to doubt yourself. But the truth is, their running says nothing about your worth. It says everything about their fear. You can be the most loving, the most patient, the most supportive person in the world. But if someone doesn't believe they're worthy of love, they will find a way to reject it. Not because you failed them, but because they haven't yet learned how to accept themselves. From a philosophical standpoint, this raises one of life's deepest truths. No one can fully receive love from another until they believe they are worthy of it themselves. You can pour love into someone endlessly, but if their cup is cracked with shame, it will never hold. That's why your role is not to fix them, not to convince them, not to chase them into believing. Your role is to recognize that their rejection is self-directed, not a verdict on you. And once you grasp that, you take your power back. Because here's what happens when you stay grounded in that truth. You stop personalizing their fear. You stop overcompensating. You stop begging for validation. Instead, you stand in the awareness that their avoidance is not about your lack, it's about their wound. And that awareness changes everything. It frees you from chasing approval and allows you to embody strength. And paradoxically, it's that strength, the refusal to collapse into insecurity, that often creates the very safety they need to eventually face their fear. This is where transformation begins. When an avoidant encounters someone who doesn't chase, who doesn't internalize their withdrawal, who doesn't make their fear about themselves, that person becomes a mirror of possibility. Suddenly, love doesn't look like exposure that leads to rejection. It looks like acceptance that leads to healing. And slowly, the avoidant learns that maybe, just maybe, they are worthy after all. But make no mistake, you cannot force this. You cannot drag them into self-worth. You can only embody your own. And in that embodiment, you show them that love doesn't have to be a threat. Love can be steady. Love can be safe. Love can be something they don't have to run from. So remember this, when an avoidant pulls away, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the parts of themselves they haven't yet learned to love. And the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is not to crumble, not to chase, but to stand in the truth of your own worth. Because when you do, you break the cycle. You refuse to let their fear write the story of your value. And here's the closing truth I want you to hold on to. Their rejection is not about you. It's about the war they're fighting within themselves. And the only way to win your side of that battle is to never forget. You are already worthy of love, whether they can receive it or not. When you finally understand why an avoidant runs, you stop taking it as a personal wound and start seeing it for what it really is. A defense mechanism built on fear, not rejection. This is crucial because many of you interpret their distance as a verdict on your worth. You think, if they loved me, they'd stay. If they cared, they wouldn't pull away. But the truth is far more complex. When an avoidant creates space, it's rarely because they don't care. It's because they do care, and that caring overwhelms them in ways they don't yet know how to manage. Their nervous system, their very psychology, has been wired to see closeness as danger. So the moment intimacy deepens, their survival instinct kicks in, and what looks like rejection is really self-preservation. Think about that for a moment. If someone is indifferent, they don't need to run. They don't need to create walls or build distance, because there's nothing to protect themselves from. It's precisely because love is stirring something powerful within them that they panic. The weight of vulnerability, the fear of being abandoned, the terror of exposing their heart, it becomes too much. Running is not a statement against you, but an attempt to regulate their own storm of emotions. This is why your first step must be to detach your self-worth from their behavior, their silence, their withdrawal, their avoidance. It isn't a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a reflection of their inner war. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting the part of themselves that believes love will inevitably lead to pain. If you internalize their distance as rejection, you will spiral into unnecessary self-doubt, chasing them harder, trying to fix what was never broken in you. That is the trap that keeps countless people stuck in cycles of toxic pursuit. The real power lies in flipping the script. Instead of asking, why don't they want me? You start asking, what is love bringing up inside them that they're not prepared to face? That shift changes everything. It moves you out of victimhood and into wisdom. It allows you to recognize that fear masquerading as rejection is not about you. It's about them running from the mirror that love holds up to their soul. And in that mirror, they see all the vulnerability, all the dependency, all the hidden longings they've suppressed. It's terrifying for someone who has built their identity around control and self-sufficiency. Here's the deeper truth. The very act of running proves the presence of love. You can't be afraid of something you don't value. A person doesn't hide from an emotion that doesn't matter. The greater the distance they create, the stronger the current pulling them underneath. And this is where you must learn to see distance, not as abandonment, but as evidence of the magnitude of their feelings. Their fear of losing control is a backhanded compliment to the power of connection they feel with you. But here's the challenge. You cannot heal them by chasing. You cannot prove love safe by erasing their fear for them. That is their work to do. The moment you take on the responsibility of soothing their fear at the cost of your own dignity, you reinforce the very cycle that keeps them running. The healthiest stance you can take is to hold steady in your own worth, to be present without pressure, and to allow them to face the reality that intimacy is not suffocating, it's liberating. And yes, this is hard, because everything in you will want to run after them, to demand answers, to bridge the silence with explanations. But real transformation only happens when you stand your ground, when they realize that love is not going to consume them, when they see that you are not trying to control or corner them, when they understand that distance does not dissolve connection, then they begin to question their fear. That's when change begins. So I want you to walk away with this. Don't mistake fear for rejection. Don't rewrite their running into a story of your unworthiness. Instead, recognize it as a signal that love has struck a chord deeper than they can handle. And then choose your response from strength, not desperation. Because when you stop seeing their fear as your rejection, you reclaim your power. You stop reacting to their wounds, and you start leading from wisdom. Here's the final thought to leave with you. Rejection closes doors, but fear opens them. Because fear can be worked through, confronted, and transformed. If you see their running for what it truly is, you no longer crumble under it. You rise above it. And when you rise, you give them the chance to rise too.